I've been watching a bunch of people making videos, a lot of influencers and whatnot making videos about these protests and police brutality and shit. When I was thinking about making this video, I was going like, what am I going to talk about? Am I going to talk about all the idiots who want to defund the police, just have no law enforcement whatsoever? You know, all these same people who, like, whenever anybody, comes at them with a chainsaw, like I remember seeing this video to keep them from illegally entering and looting his business. Remember, what do all those people start screaming once somebody physically stops them from looting? Call the police! Look, at the end of the day, none of these people are honest. And we can debate about individual reasons why some of these people are dishonest. Sometimes it's for financial reasons. Sometimes it's for virtue signaling. I've seen some particularly smarty pants content creators use the terms performative grief, because it's kind of funny. Nobody cares who George Floyd is. I mean, they care what he represents, if they really care at all. Which is that, oh, he's a black man who, he was strangled to death due to what is, some police precincts use this technique, a lot of them don't, where you kneel on the upper part of a person's back and neck to hold them down, and it has killed people. It killed George Floyd. It killed a white person by the name of Tony Timpa last year. And even worse, that video, if you ever watch it, the cops make fun of him as he's crying out that he can't breathe, saying, oh, you can breathe, you're crying, right? And then when he passes out and then eventually dies, they make fun of him saying, see, what were you panicking for? You're so calm you fell asleep. White guy. So is it racial, or is it just bad police technique? Well, when I was a kid, a real little kid in elementary school, I acted out a lot. I have a bipolar disorder, which is a really shitty thing I wouldn't wish on anybody. It's fine. It's managed now. I got medication that works fine. I have almost no symptoms, but, growing up was really hard for me. And back in the 90s, because this is going to be kind of a personal anecdote-y kind of fucking video, because that's what a lot of people are doing. Ethan Klein comes to mind. They didn't know what to do about kids that acted out like I did. They gave me Ritalin, which for a kid like me was basically like giving a kid crack, so I'd act out worse, and then I would pass out from the crash, basically. I actually got a concussion once from falling out of my chair in music class. And I was, I believe, either in first grade or kindergarten when that happened. So real little in the system, getting just on a cocktail of drugs, none of which helped. A lot of these kids who are bad kids who act out, or kids with emotional issues, what pushes them over the edge into school shooterdom is that a lot of these drugs that they give kids don't help. They make it worse. And the problem is, not so much trying to give kids drugs, because the thing is, they affect pretty much everybody differently to a degree, and one person's drug that works really well is another person's make them way worse. And the only thing is, like, if your doctor doesn't listen to you when you say this medication doesn't help, it's making my life way harder, and he just says, oh, we'll just up the dosage or something, it's time to get a new doctor immediately. That's my learned experience from that shit. But when I was that kind of kid acting out, a lot of times what they'd do is they'd physically restrain you. And one of the ways that I got physically restrained by adult male teachers when I was like 6 or 7 years old was having a knee placed in the upper part of my back. And I can tell you that there were a lot of times where I felt like I couldn't breathe. And at the very least, my breathing was heavily restricted. And the scary thing about these kind of restraints was the policy was you don't get 15 minutes with a knee in your back. You get an indeterminate amount of time with a knee in your back until you completely are calm and silent. You have to physically not move and not say a word. And then you get 15 minutes. And if you're lucky, the teacher will get tired of doing it before 15 minutes are up. So you can imagine that I know what it's like to barely fucking be able to breathe and think that you're dying, but know that your only chance of getting out is staying fucking quiet. So I can say that I have a similar personal experience. What about having cops pointing guns at you? I've had a police officer point a firearm in my face on 4 different occasions, and they were 4 different reasons. I even can claim the Karen called the cops on me on my own property for shooting fucking soda cans in my backyard with a Daisy air rifle. She told the cops I had like a fucking scoped hunting rifle and was shooting ducks, which is illegal within city limits. It's illegal without a permit. It's illegal to have a gun like that when you're, God, I think I was 18 at the time, so it could have been legal for me to have the gun. But keep in mind, this was a Karen across a body of water, across a pond on the other side of a fence, calling the cops on me. I saw her do it. And the cops came, and I mean cops plural, as in 6 cops came around from both sides of my house because my backyard isn't fenced, guns drawn. What did I do? Dropped the freaking BB gun. I was there with my friend who, unfortunately, he had like a fucking machete tied to his back because he's a knife enthusiast, and he brought a machete over my house to show it. And he knew not to touch it. Just hands up. Obey lawful commands, had to get handcuffed, blah, blah, blah. One time I was with that same friend. We were loitering in a parking lot that we thought was a public parking lot. We were backed into a back corner of the parking lot. Turns out the lot was private. Was it labeled as private property? No. Do I know what the fuck the person who called the cops on us said to have the cops scream up to almost ram into the front of his car, get out, and Glock 40s through the fucking windshield? No. What did I do? Hands up. Cops said, get out of the car. And I said, and I just lean out the window and say, the car is unlocked. Is it okay if you guys come and, get us? Like, I don't want to put my hands out of you. Is it all right if you come open this door? I'll get out, come quietly, whatever you want. Just, I want you to be able to see my hands. You just got to react calmly, obey lawful orders. Now, you guys remember, here's a name that BLM seems to have forgotten for some strange reason, because I always thought it was one of the cases that they weren't lying about, because we had videos of it and it was pretty blatant. The Tamir Rice shooting. When I was 12 years old, same age as Tamir Rice, I had painted a squirt gun black, and I had dressed up as like a zombie commando for Halloween, and I had a squirt gun fight with my friends in a playground that was right outside of my house, and just about another block or so away from that playground was a Walgreens. And after playing with them, I walked about a block and a half, and I'm talking like small town blocks, not big city blocks, to the Walgreens, go buy a pack of Pokemon cards, and then walk back. And somehow, just in like the walk there, according to what the cop said, I don't know if he was exaggerating or not, like no less than like 9 people called the cops and said, kid with a gun. Now, I had a squirt gun that I had painted black, and this squirt gun looked just like a .45 ACP. So this was a very stupid idea. It used to be neon green. Now it looks like a real gun. Now, the difference between me and Tamir Rice, though, was I never pointed that squirt gun at anybody. In fact, one of the weird things about the sheriff who pointed a fucking Smith & Wesson 45, because apparently this guy didn't believe in standard issue 38s, at me, he came screaming up, no lights, no sirens, just drove up real fast. And I had the squirt gun in my hand, and I wasn't even thinking that the cop could possibly be there for me. So I looked to my left and went, I wonder what's going on at that house that this cop drove up so fast. And then I hear, put the gun down now. And I look back, and about 10 yards away, he's Weaver stance, behind his driver's side door, fucking Magnum pointed at me. And what did I do? Realized what was in my hand, didn't even lift my hand up, just dropped it, fell to my knees like I was about to play a guitar solo, and fucking hands in the air. It's just plastic. I was screaming. And that cop saw fit to humiliate me too, because keep in mind, I live in a small town, so they called all available units. So while me crying in the back seat of this guy's car, him telling me I'm a fucking idiot, every last cop who pulled up was like in a line standing to see me like I'm a freak show carnival attraction, going, is this the kid? Well, it was a squirt gun? Kid, you're a fucking retard. One cop after the other, and then this cop drives me pretty much no more than about 300 yards around the corner to my house, and then fucking parades me in front of my mom. It's a shitty experience. I could have died. but I didn't. Now, you could say it was my white skin, or it could be that Tamir Rice had the cops called on him because he was pointing his fake gun at people. And I still don't believe he should have been shot, but was it cold-blooded murder? No. Do I believe George Floyd was cold-blooded murder? No. It was gross, negligent manslaughter. What is that? 7 years max? 10? I forget. I think that cop is balls to the wall guilty of that. Now, do you think if that cop gets charged, convicted, and sentenced to negligent manslaughter, that there won't be more riots because everyone wants to hear capital murder, or at the very least second-degree murder? Now, imagine if the guy gets acquitted because rather than go for a surefire fucking conviction charge, manslaughter, they have to kowtow to a bunch of looters and in a racketeering mafia known as BLM. It's a fucking marketing scam. Why do we all have to say Black Lives Matter? Can't we say like African Americans are people too? You know why? Because it's a brand. It's a fucking corporation, dude. And all the corporations that the black square, it's not just them. BLM itself is a fucking scam. In the same way that feminist frequency is a scam, or fucking, take your pick, So you look at all this, and you look at a guy like me, like middle class now, and I was poor for quite a while, and then take a guy like LeBron James, who's just saying like Black Lives Matter, cops this, I'm oppressed that. There's institutional racism in the NFL, says some athletes, and NBA, blah, blah, blah. And keep in mind that a couple months ago during the Hong Kong protests, for a financial, corporate, basic bitch reason, you got LeBron James saying it's wrong and it's misguided or you're incorrect to say anything on behalf of Hong Kong, and saying that could get people hurt. It can cost people their jobs. It can cost people their health or their lives. I don't know why the fuck he said that, because it makes no fucking sense. And it's because the NBA is very closely financially tied to China, and the gamers got a lot of the basketball players, they have a lot of marketing deals in China, and China is an extremely authoritarian, communist, a bunch of butchers. They're a fucking dictatorship, and you got all these fucking people sucking the CCP's dick, and then saying, "Oh, America's racist. All cops are racist." And your solution is what? Re-educate the police? How about ban the kneeling on the back of somebody's neck thing? Like, how about ban that nationwide? Is that not a solution? Because guess what? I can bring this back full circle. Do you know why teachers are never ever in all of America are never ever allowed to physically restrain kids? Not even close to the way that I was restrained in elementary school. You know why? Because multiple children have died from it. Did they abolish the job occupation of public school teacher? No, they banned the practice. Have you all gone insane? And how many millionaires are you going to take? If you're not going to take LeBron James, you're going to take Colin Kaepernick. Are we going to frickin' lynch Drew Brees for saying he doesn't agree with kneeling? I'm sorry, like, people keep saying class inequality or wealth inequality out of one side of their mouth, and then the next side they're going to take a bunch of black multimillionaires' word against a white multimillionaire in the same exact profession, all in the same exact level of privilege. Are you serious? Over what? Over disagreeing with the politicization of fucking football? Is there no realm? You got like Markiplier and Ethan Klein, so shitty Jewish podcasters and half Asian Let's Players who are just super well known for their fucking vapid, completely contradictory takes. And And I gotta ask, how many of you, even if you're black, say you're a black Democrat, and I know every once in a while some of you show up and you see these videos, do you know or give a shit who George Floyd is? Be honest. Or do you think he represents you? And are you honest about, are you just getting hunted down by racist cops because you're black? Or is there a problem with black criminals who actually have rap sheets that will show up on any cop's computer when he looks up your name? Like, say, George Floyd, armed robber, he put the gun to a belly of a pregnant woman and threatened the life of her unborn child during a home invasion. He was on drugs and actually did pass off a counterfeit bill at a store when he was arrested. Now, did this cop beat him? Did this cop shoot him? Or did this cop very extremely negligently use a restraint maneuver that no cop should ever fucking use? Ever. Yes. Have white people died to this same maneuver in the same exact negligent fashion because the cop didn't understand that he was asphyxiating somebody? Yes. Now, was this possibly racially motivated? There's been some circumstantial evidence that Officer Chauvin had known George Floyd from a previous job that they worked at, or a job site where they both were present at, not necessarily known if they'd ever talked to each other. Maybe. But what is Occam's razor here? What's much more likely? This cop was a fucking idiot. Now, did this cop also have a history of excessive use of force? He had complaints against him that refused to be prosecuted. That's true. And it is true that there are a lot of cops that the DAs of states won't prosecute. Remember when I mentioned Tony Timpa, who was asphyxiated by cops who mocked him? Yeah, the DA didn't even press charges. So maybe we are making strides. But is BLM ever going to admit we're going to make strides? No, we have to literally abolish all police. Well, you saw what happened when police just, don't do their job. Riots. Oh, how about that old white guy who got his head cracked open? Well, I watched the video. I watched him jab his hand right towards the cop's gun. Now, was he trying to reach for it? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think the guy had his phone in his hand, so it's unlikely that he was trying to grab the gun. Was he in the cop's personal space? Yes. Was he yelling in the cop's face? Yes. Was he jabbing his hands towards the cop's belt? Yes. Did the cop shove him? Yes. Did the cop shove him hard? No. Did this white guy, I don't recall his name, who got his head split open on the sidewalk, did he trip over his own 2 fucking feet and land on the back of his head? Yes. Now, the last thing I'll say, because we'll end up going for 30 minutes if I talk about like literally everything that's gone on over the past week. 2 cops were suspended or fired, I forget which, over this incident. I believe it was the cop who pushed him and one cop who told him, the guy who pushed the guy to not render aid. Keep in mind, because in the very next breath, they called over an actual, I believe it was either a National Guard medic or just a medic of some organization that for some reason was wearing camouflage. And the guy was immediately treated and sent into the hospital. The white guy who split his head open. Now, why did that entire unit resign? You might have seen a bunch of news articles say that they resigned in solidarity with the suspended officers. That's not true. They actually resigned in protest of their union. See, cops are prone to people lying about them for excessive use of force, this, that, and the other thing. And mayors and police departments are prone to being capitulating little bitch pussies and firing people with or without good reason based on the demands of a public mob. Now, what a union does is defend the rights and the well-being of the cops in the same way that, say, a defense attorney would defend any criminal or just a person who's arrested on suspicion of being a criminal, blah, blah, blah. I'm not here to fucking wax semantics about it. But the thing is, What that union showed, and the precinct that fired these cops or suspended them, I forget which, showed, was that the union was not going to advocate on behalf of anybody in that riot squad for any reason, for fear of public retaliation. And the precinct wasn't going to defend them either. So the only thing to do is to fucking resign and protest, because there is no fucking way they could possibly safely do their job. They're at the complete mercy of the public. And this is just, when a city will actually, use the riot police to quell a riot. Now, I know some people have been shot dead by police in these riots. There have been 5 police officers, at least, last I checked, who have been killed by rioters. And there have been over a dozen innocent civilians who have been killed by rioters. Some were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some were other rioters who were probably being killed because they got the better loot out of the store. And some were store owners. One, a famous one, a black man, retired police officer David Dorn, was just executed out of nowhere during a riot. And he didn't do anything wrong. Will you hear BLM ever say his name? No. He was a civilian. Technically, he had been retired from the police force for quite a long time. But here's the last thing I'll say, and I know I said it at length in the last video, but I'm going to reiterate this. Black Lives Matter does not care about black lives. Your life does not matter. It doesn't matter who you've been killed by. The only way your life matters to BLM is if they can use you to generate a profit, if they can raise money on the back of your name. And really, it just comes down to testing the waters. They almost had a thing with Michael Brown, and then they find out Michael Brown actually was an armed robber who tried to attack and kill a police officer, and it was justified shooting. And boy, did that set them back a few years, didn't it? But then here we are right back. George Floyd, a career criminal who'd been into and out of prison, I think at least 7 times, who did commit a crime that he was being arrested for, and he died to a negligent homicide. And what is this? Institutional racism. Systemic racism is not real in the United States. Period. Institutional racism is not real in the United States. Period. And I'll tell you how I can prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt in a single sentence. You keep bringing up these individual cases that happen 1 or 2 a year where there's literally no way to explain it other than it was at the very least a negligent homicide, and oftentimes you BLM screw up mentioning shit like Michael Brown when that was a very bad idea, wasn't it? And the reason why you need to desperately cherry pick these results is because there is 1 million police officers in this country, and every once in a while something bad happens that's at least negligent homicide, and therefore we should riot and give you millions of dollars. That's not systemic. That's an exception to a rule, and the rule is the exact opposite of systemic racism. We have systemic equality. Period. And you will never admit that, because the day you admit that, you will stop making millions of dollars. You'll stop having an excuse for the behavior of your community and the behavior of certain members of your community, and it will force you to look at what really ends black lives by the tens of thousands or even the millions in this country. Gang violence, drug addiction, and abortion. But hey, you know what? We'll put that one aside because it's contentious, and we'll focus on 2 that you absolutely can't argue under any circumstances. That's roughly like 10,000 black people died, other black people in shooting. Hundreds of people who are not gang affiliated or killed by gangbangers in this country. And I mean black people killed by black street members. How about heart disease? That kills a fuck of a lot of black people. You don't care. This isn't about lives. This isn't about an excuse to be a savage. And if you think being called a savage is racist. No, I'm not calling all black people savages. I'm calling you personally a savage. And you know what? I'm right. I'm factually, objectively correct. So how about you stop?